Hello students, it's Mrs. T again, and this is your last lecture for this week number 4 when I have to give everybody, my face-to-face and my online students, some online video lectures to take notes and to learn from since I am out of town. I'll be back with you on Monday of next week. And of course, my Tuesday, Thursday classes, since I'm on jury duty this year, I have to, play it by ear about whether I actually will see you Tuesday, Thursday classes in person on Tuesday or not. We'll follow the plan that I give you about what to do in case I have to go in for jury selection. So anyway, here's this last video. Let's not drag it out too long. We are in chapter 3. There is a test posted for you that you should not try to complete entirely until you have watched this last lecture. But this topic today goes along with socialization. It's chapter 3, socialization. And the topics that we're going to cover today aren't just specific to sociology. It's going to be some biology, biological science, and also psychology, because the definition of socialization goes something like this. I always paraphrase it, and you can paraphrase it too, as long as you give me a complete definition. The socialization process is a lifelong learning process. And the learning that we do takes place through social interaction. So all the experiences that we have, whether they are organized in a formal way, like this schooling that you're doing right now, or whether it's informal, like just having lunch on a Saturday afternoon, with your friends. All of those experiences contribute to your learning process. And it contributes to the knowledge that you have about how to get by in your social group at the different stages of your life. So that's what socialization is all about. But since we say that socialization is a lifelong process, it's important for us to look at brain development like psychologists do, to understand what is it that people can learn as early as birth. Because that's what lifelong means, right? Lifelong means birth to death. For the purposes of this discussion, we're going to say that lifelong means birth to death. Okay, so it's important for us to understand psychological research, developmental psychological research about your cognitive abilities early in life before your brain is fully developed, in order for us to prove or make that claim, be confident in that claim that socialization is a lifelong process. Additionally, since the human being has a specific biology, a specific biochemistry, and a specific makeup that makes them human, biologists, some biologists, not all, but some biologists suggest that our physical makeup, our body chemistry, and our biological makeup determines some of the behaviors that we engage in our lives. Sociobiology is a topic that you'll read about in chapter 3 if you haven't already done so. Sociobiology is a systematic study of how biology might affect social behavior. Okay, and so certainly there are some behaviors that human beings must engage in daily, weekly, in order to be, because we are human or because we are animals. So as animals, of course, we must eat and we must sleep and we must pee and poop and we have reflexes and, all of these different kinds of things. We're going to sneeze and we're going to produce tears and these are the kinds of things that we are going to do because we are animals. So some of the culture, some of the habits, the rituals, the knowledge, the material items that are specific to our societies, some of our cultural ways are determined by the fact that we have to eat and sleep and pee and poop and all those things that I just mentioned. But think about the eating necessity. Does everybody have the same cuisine all over the world? Or Can you go from France to Spain to Argentina to Russia to Asia, all the different places in Asia? And do you find different ideas about what is or isn't edible and what you should or shouldn't prepare something like? Do you fry it? Do you bake it? Do you eat it raw? All of these different questions are answered differently based on the culture where you are. But that's not really what sociobiologists point to as the biggest argument about biology determining behavior. It has to do more with the makeup that we have, the structure, I guess, of our physical selves and the drives that we have to reproduce and to have survival of the fittest animal within us. So it has to do with evolutionary processes and the needs or the drives that animals and other organisms have to live on from generation to generation. So sociobiology suggests that our biological makeup is a very strong determinant for what many of the things in our society, many of the cultural ways that we have in our society, where those things came from. Sociobiologists study this. The very beginning of the chapter, you're going to see a section or several sections, a few pages on the debates that sociologists have with sociobiologists about what is more significant, what contributes more significantly to the way that we behave as humans. Is it the socialization process, or is it that biology that they're talking about? Because neither of the two sides, like you won't find a sociologist who says biology has nothing to do with it. It's all society. And you won't find a biologist that says biology has everything to do with it and it's not society at all. They're not, in other words, on these rigid platforms to say, I am right, you are wrong. You will find people who lean more toward social conditions or environmental conditions, and you will hear people who lean more toward the natural condition or biological state of something that determines behavior and determines culture. But they won't say, it's not a part of society at all. So some of you might have heard some key terms in there, some key words, and those two key words are nature and nurture. Nature versus nurture is a phrase you have probably read about before or discussed in other college classes, or if this is your first college class, it will not be the last time you hear this concept discussed. So nature versus nurture is discussing, it's the debate about what I have just explained to you. It's the question, is nature or our biology more vital or a more significant contributor to our human condition? Or is culture or nurture or environment or socialization more important to determining how we are going to behave as social creatures? And it's an interesting debate. We can't really do too much systematic study to answer these questions because we're limited. As researchers, we are limited by the kinds of research models we can set up. Let me refer you to the end of chapter 1 that we completed during week 2. We're limited to the kinds of experimental models or research models we can set up because human beings are intelligent creatures who have rights that must be respected when we are doing research. Human rights are international issues right now and hotly debated. And so as sociologists, since we're studying humans, we have to really be cognizant. We have to be aware that we must treat people with respect and dignity all throughout, and fairness and ethics all throughout our research. So what I'm getting at is, how could we determine that the degree to which socialization affects somebody's behavior in comparison to the degree to which biology would just take off with it and affect their behavior? You would have to isolate those people. You would have to isolate people from interaction with the rest of their social group in order to see if biology takes off and ends up in the same direction, or vice versa, and that is a violation of human rights. So we don't have any systematic data to study about this, but we have a lot of people who are fascinated with the topic and suggest data about evolutionary processes or data about upbringing and experiences that kind of give us some insight about the power of biology over the power of socialization, and the power of socialization over the power of biology. It's a fascinating debate that is ongoing, and I, of course, I'm not the smartest person in the world by far, but I certainly don't see any end to this debate because of the limitations that we have for studying these questions. In your textbook, however, there are some very unusual cases in world history that give us examples of children that we call feral children, F-E-R-A-L. Some of you maybe know that word in nature because, you know, you might talk about a feral cat, a wild cat in the neighborhood that, you know, grows around, doesn't have any rules and runs around and, you know, wreaks havoc, or, you know, beats up on your house cat or something. So feral simply means wild, untrained, untrainable. So we have this phrase, feral children, that applies to certain people throughout history who have been discovered after a significant portion of their childhood has passed, and those people have not they have not participated in the expected or typical socialization process that a human being goes through. So, for instance, there is a little girl in your textbook at the beginning of chapter 3 named Jeannie, spelled like a genie in a bottle. And she was a case of tremendous, you know, just terrible child abuse. There is a video from the 1980s, I believe, or maybe early 90s, from a program on public television called Nova. And the program was called The Wild Child, Jeannie the Wild Child. It's all over YouTube. You could find it easily. I think it's in my playlist. Anyway, and then the short section in chapter 3, she was neglected terribly growing up. She did not go through the expected socialization process that children would go through. No one spoke to her, no one interacted with her except in very negative ways. No one encouraged her to make sounds or learn how to talk. No one potty trained her. I believe she was 13 or 14 years old when a social worker discovered her, and she had not had any sort of normal human interaction whatsoever. Therefore, she did not behave in human ways. Her posture was not what we would expect. The way she walked and moved was not what we expect of people out in a public place or even within your own home. She didn't have language skills. She didn't know how to use a knife, fork, and spoon, all these different kinds of things that are part of that definition of the word culture. She had not gone through a socialization process to that point that gave her any of the skills needed to behave in a social fashion that was recognizable, that she shared culture that had been passed from the previous generation to her. It didn't happen. And so we have isolated cases like that. You can read another couple examples in your textbook. You can read about experiments that have occurred with non-human primates, like monkeys and apes. Those are non-human primates. So we do have some data that we can collect, some very unfortunate cases of abuse, such as in the case of Jeannie, that give us some insight. But we can't ever really finalize the answer to the question, is nature stronger than nurture? But it's important for a sociologist to understand the biology of being human, because certainly that is part of what makes us us. And we cannot be complete and thorough scientists without a knowledge of that aspect of being human. Additionally, in psychology, psychology is very biologically based. For those of you who have had just an introductory course, you know that you study the parts of the brain and brain development, and the way the nervous system controls taste and smell and all that kind of stuff. Many psychologists focus their careers and their studies on brain development, because just like all of us know, it's no news flash for me to say that babies are born small and their skeletons get larger over time, right? Um, a brain also, the human brain, is in the body when you're born. However, all of the neuroconnectors have not been developed yet at the time of birth, and there are many years of development that we can expect the human brain to go through before it is fully developed with all of the neuroconnectors that are going to be present throughout adulthood. So many psychologists, such as Jean Piaget, who you will read about in chapter 3, also Sigmund Freud is mentioned in chapter 3, many psychologists look at the makeup, the biological makeup of the brain, and the urges that we have or the cognitive abilities that we have at different phases of our life. So, since sociologists claim that learning in the socialization process begins at birth, it's important to look to psychologists such as Jean Piaget, he's a famous developmental psychologist, who studied different age groups of children and their cognitive abilities. So you can look at his cognitive development theory, for instance, and find and read about his discoveries about the aptitude, the knowledge that the human brain is or is not able to comprehend or to hold from, say, birth until 2 years old. You can comprehend and hold knowledge of some sort, but it's limited because your brain has not been developed past that 2-year-old stage, which puts you into a pre-operational stage, where you can start to understand object permanence and have memories and all of the different sorts of factual comprehension potential that Jean Piaget discovered during his lifetime of research about development. So we sociologists claim that learning through the socialization process begins at birth. So psychology is an important component of that. We have to be very well versed in developmental psychology especially. And we sociologists also are aware and understand that biology, to a certain extent, determines some of our behaviors and actions. However, in the nature versus nurture debate, sociologists lean more heavily toward the nurture side of that equation, because the nurture side discusses the environment, the experiences that your social environment creates for you, the agents of socialization that you experience, the personal interaction that you have with the people around you, and those are the mechanisms through which the socialization process takes place over the life course. So that is our last lecture from chapter 3, and that completes all the information that you're going to need to be able to complete our first test successfully. And also keep the notes from this and the other lectures handy, because when I do get back and see you face to face, or when you online students start to see the actual live classes that I capture again, you're going to have another 25 point, actually I think we might be doing our 50 point activity first, where you use this information to evaluate a situation and come to conclusions. I don't ask you to do too much of that on the test that is available, because even though I'm calling it a test, it's more of a learning experience for you. You should treat it that way. So the evaluation and analysis part of this class that gets you into the critical reasoning skills that you need, that's going to come from those 50 point and 25 point activities where you evaluate something and discuss things with me and your classmates. So that's it for this week. Make sure you watch these as many times as you need to and text me with questions. And I will see, hopefully, all of you again in the classroom on Monday and Tuesday of next week. And you online students, you will see a video of me back in the classroom. So have a wonderful weekend. See you soon.